Microsoft began work on a framework to link and embed things into objects such as documents in 1990 with, well, object linking and embedding. First appearing in Windows 3.1 a couple years later, it marked a step up from the company's Dynamic Data Exchange introduced in 1987 with Windows 2.0 that allowed processes to work alongside each other. Version 2 of OLE was introduced in 1993 as part of the Component Object Model, or COM, a key component of almost all of Microsoft's later projects. However, some less experienced developers were overwhelmed coding with OLE 2.0, which was said to be quite complex for its time. As a result, Microsoft sought to simplify the OLE API for these developers, and in March 1996 released the results of their work in the form of ActiveX. This new framework allowed for embedded content into various programs on a network in various programs, especially things from the World Wide Web, which was fast becoming a hot venue at the time. Many IDEs would start implementing ways to add ActiveX controls to products even outside of Microsoft, and as such the company positioned it to be a competitor to Java's web-based applets at the time, with performance comparable to those applets along with an easier time programming, with Microsoft saying the framework was supposedly compatible across multiple platforms. Despite this, developers initially still struggled with ActiveX's complexities, which led Microsoft to introduce wizards and various extensions to help make such controls possible. What would be a bigger problem would be the claimed multi-platform compatibility, which turned out to be effectively a twisting of words by the company. Due to the nature of the controls often being coded in C or C++ and containing compiled x86 instructions, this made them only work on Windows due to using its APIs for calls to the controls. Microsoft did attempt to push ActiveX on other platforms, with a beta for Mac released by them in October 1996, and planned Solaris support later. These never fully happened, and as such ActiveX remained largely a Windows-exclusive technology used in Internet Explorer, which ActiveX started to appear in the third version of that browser, released in August 1996. Web developer attraction was slow initially, but did garner some attention from some software houses and hobbyists. Over the next few versions of Internet Explorer, the ActiveX family of applications evolved, eventually encompassing web page scripting, editing of Office documents inside the browser, the container component for video and audio streaming, most currently this contained the WMA and WMV formats, and server-side scripting, all of which were components of the ActiveX library. However, the most visible component, the browser controls, proved to be controversial since the genesis of ActiveX, due to a system and authentication and trusted developers needing to pay a fee in exchange for a promise not to develop malware, which would then take the code and run it with full permissions on the browser end. Security became a major problem since even as simple as a minor bug could prove to be an exploit for the plugin, and as such many security patches became the norm for ActiveX. Compare this to the sandbox nature of Java's applets and other plugins, which had significantly less security issues thanks to their isolated environments. As such, adoption of ActiveX remained minimal throughout the 90s and 2000s, but was picked up by some government agencies like South Korea, as well as corporate intranets that used Internet Explorer for many years. Browser support would remain mostly limited to IE, but some browsers like Netscape Navigator and Firefox would provide ActiveX-capable plugins for their browsers, albeit in a somewhat incomplete state. On the public side, ActiveX was mostly relegated to demos of PC shareware games from the 2000s, such as many play-first releases like Diner Dash or Raptorsoft's releases such as Hamster Ball, which often showed off the capabilities of ActiveX's potential, coming close to their full PC counterparts. ActiveX was also used in universities for web application experiments. However, these remain limited to a small market compared to Microsoft's original ambitions, and by the time Flash took off in popularity and IE's market share began to fall in the late 2000s, it seemed ActiveX had all but been forgotten. But Microsoft did not give up on the browser plugin market with ActiveX's fall. In 2007, they had another trick up their sleeves, with the introduction of Microsoft Silverlight. A much more advanced plugin than ActiveX ever was, it allowed to run far more rich applications, getting to the standards comparable to Flash, if not beating them in some workloads like video streaming, using XAML with .NET to create advanced web apps. That got the attention of major services like Netflix and Amazon Video, which decided to use Silverlight for their streaming platforms, as did both the Olympics of 2008 and 2010. Suffice to say, Silverlight looked like a surefire hit. The plugin avoided a lot of the mistakes that plagued ActiveX, such as having a greater emphasis on cross-platform compatibility by actually having a Mac version this time, along with no requirement of any Windows components compared to the heavily x86 Windows-oriented ActiveX suite. In addition, the plugin was not just supported on IE, but on Firefox and Chrome too, only increasing Silverlight's share. Oh, and Silverlight was used to make some of the Windows Vista gadgets as well. Within the gaming space, though, usage of Silverlight in games remained minimal, as Flash by this point was the undisputed king in this field. However, a few notable Silverlight games were still made. Intriguingly, a Silverlight version of Flash hit, Line Rider, was made in the wake of the Flash version's success, featuring extra features not in the original, such as an erase tool, though this would be merged back into the original game. A small amount of tech demos would also exist for Silverlight, such as a space shooter and a Pac-Man clone. Casual games such as Brain App, later turned into a mobile app apparently, and Puzzle Touch, exactly as it sounds, also existed, and likely became one of Silverlight's most popular games. However, the Tetris company did make use of the technology to make Tetris Stardust, an official Japanese exclusive web game. However, the real juicy showcase arguably belongs to this. SilvOS, a fully featured operating system inside of a web browser, with the interface very much resembling Windows 7, the contemporary OS at the time, as well as full file support with your local machine. It's a genuinely impressive piece of work for the technology. Granted, many components don't exactly work many years later, but hey, this was still great stuff. Unfortunately, as you can deduce from Silverlight's obscurity today, the plugin did not have long for this world after the initial momentum faded. Silverlight had 5 major versions, with the 5th and final version arriving in May 2012. Microsoft would shift focus away from Silverlight the previous year, as Flash remained a mainstay of the web despite its best efforts. As for ActiveX, it remains a part of Internet Explorer to this day, and as a Windows component, it will continue to receive support until at least 2029, though obviously its usage has strongly been discouraged thanks to its gaping security holes in the modern age. Silverlight, meanwhile, was gradually phased out in favor of HTML5, starting with Windows 8's release in October 2012. And in 2015, Microsoft told developers to focus on that instead. Support ultimately ended for Silverlight on October 12, 2021 for Internet Explorer. However, as an NPAPI program, it was removed from Firefox and Chrome long before, in 2017 and 2015 respectively. The twin failures of both ActiveX and Silverlight showed that Microsoft missed the mark when it came to the web app market compared to the juggernauts of Flash, Shockwave, and Java. But credit to Microsoft is deserved for their attempts, which are respectable if flawed implementations of interactive content on the internet. And speaking of Flash, it's high time we check back on them, as they've grown a lot with their new owners.